I still remember the exact moment I realized something was wrong. It was sometime after midnight, and I was sitting alone in my car at a gas station that looked like it hadn't been updated since the early 90s. The fluorescent lights above the pumps flickered every few seconds, buzzing softly in the quiet night. There were no other cars around, no people, just the hum of the lights and the faint sound of wind moving through the trees behind the station. At the time, bored, I told myself it was just another stop on a long drive. Now I know that was the moment everything started. My name is Daniel, and this happened about 6 years ago, back when I was 24. I had just started a new job that required a lot of driving between small towns in the southern Appalachian region. Most of the time it wasn't bad. The roads were quiet, the scenery was beautiful, and I usually had the entire highway to myself. But that night was different. I had left a small town in Tennessee around 9 p.m. after finishing some work for a client. It was already dark by the time I started the 2-hour drive back to my apartment. The route took me through a stretch of rural highway that cut directly through miles and miles of forest. No houses, no towns, just trees. I had driven that road a few times before, and it was always the same story. Long, empty stretches of asphalt with nothing but the occasional gas station or abandoned building along the way. About 40 minutes into the drive, I noticed my gas gauge dipping lower than I expected. I must have misjudged how much fuel I had left when I started the trip. Normally that wouldn't be a big deal, but on that particular highway, gas stations weren't exactly common. I kept driving for another 15 minutes before I finally saw a small glowing sign through the trees. Gas. Open 24 hours. I felt a little relieved when I saw it. The station itself sat a little off the road, connected by a narrow, cracked driveway. It looked old. Not abandoned exactly, but definitely neglected. The paint on the building was peeling, and one of the overhead lights near the entrance kept flickering like it was about to burn out. Still, gas was gas. I pulled up to one of the pumps and turned the engine off. The silence hit me immediately. When you're driving for a long time, the moment the engine stops feels strangely loud. My ears rang slightly as the quiet settled in. I stepped out of the car and stretched my back, breathing in the cool night air. That's when I noticed something odd. The convenience store inside the station looked open, but I couldn't see anyone behind the counter. Usually when you pull into a place like that in the middle of the night, there's at least one bored employee sitting inside, scrolling on their phone or watching a small TV. But the inside of the store looked empty. The lights were on. The door was unlocked. But there was no one there. At first I assumed the employee was probably in the bathroom or maybe outside somewhere. It didn't really matter. I swiped my card at the pump and started filling the tank. The pump clicked and hummed as the gas began flowing. I leaned against my car and pulled out my phone, half paying attention to the numbers climbing on the pump display. That's when I heard it, on a faint metallic clanging sound coming from somewhere behind the station. At first, I thought it might have been the wind knocking something over, but when I looked toward the sound, the trees behind the building were completely still. No wind, no movement, just darkness. The forest behind the station was thick, the kind of dense tree line where the darkness looks almost solid. My headlights barely touched the edge of it. I listened for another moment. Nothing. I shook my head and looked back down at my phone, figuring it was probably nothing. Then the sound happened again. Clang. This time it was louder. It sounded like metal hitting metal, almost like someone had dropped a tool onto a concrete floor. I slowly turned my head toward the back of the building again. The strange thing was the sound didn't echo the way it should have if it came from inside the store. It sounded like it came from somewhere outside, behind the building. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it. It wasn't really my problem if someone was messing around back there. But something about the empty store started bothering me. If the employee was outside, why would they leave the counter unattended? I looked at the pump display. Still another minute before the tank would be full. The night suddenly felt a little too quiet. I glanced toward the convenience store window again, half expecting someone to walk back behind the counter. But the store was still empty. No movement. No one inside. Just bright white fluorescent lights illuminating rows of snacks and drinks. Then I heard something else. This time it wasn't metal. It sounded like a door slamming somewhere behind the station. A heavy one. the kind of sound you feel through the ground. I stood up straight and looked toward the building again, trying to see if someone would appear from around the corner. No one did. The pump clicked. My tank was full, yet normally I would have just gotten back in my car and left. But as I reached for the nozzle, I noticed something that made the back of my neck tighten. The front door of the convenience store had slowly drifted open, just a few inches. I was almost positive it had been closed a minute ago, and I definitely hadn't seen anyone walk out. For a moment, I just stood there holding the nozzle, staring at the slightly open door. The lights inside buzzed softly. The aisles were empty. The counter was empty, but the door kept moving, slowly creaking open another inch. At that point, I told myself there was probably a simple explanation. Maybe the employee had stepped outside. Maybe the wind had pushed the door open. Maybe someone was restocking something behind the building. But the deeper part of my brain was already telling me something else. Something wasn't right about that place. I put the nozzle back into the pump and started walking toward the store. Each step across the cracked pavement sounded louder than it should have. The buzzing lights, the open door, the empty counter, all of it felt wrong. I reached the entrance and gently pushed the door open the rest of the way. The bell above the frame jingled softly as I stepped inside. "Hello," I called out. My voice echoed through the store. No answer. I walked a few steps toward the counter and looked behind it.
I've got you.
The cash register was on.
Help me.
A small
So weak.
TV sat on a shelf
Almost
in the
there.
corner
Just a
playing
bit
a
more.
late-night news channel with the
I
volume
can't see,
muted.
it's so dark.
But there was still no employee, or ET. It was a small sound. So small that under normal circumstances, I probably would have ignored it. Just a soft scrape, like something dragging lightly across the floor. I froze in place and stared at the dark hallway. For a second, I honestly expected someone to step out and explain everything.
Quick, get down.
Some exhausted night clerk. Maybe an
He's
old guy
coming.
stocking boxes in the back room.
Don't move.
Maybe someone who didn't hear me when I first called out. But nothing came out of that hallway, and the store remained completely
Easy
still.
now. I've got you.
I remember becoming
close, I can
painfully
feel
aware
it.
of every little
Stay quiet.
sound around
I'll
me.
check.
The low electrical buzz from the
Hurry,
ceiling lights,
please.
the faint static crackle from the muted TV in the corner, the hum of one of the refrigerators along the back wall. And somewhere behind all of it, from the darkness past that half-open door,
Quick, get down.
there was the feeling that something or someone
coming.
was standing there just out of sight.
Don't move.
I cleared my throat and called out again. Hello? Still nothing. I should have left right then. That's the part that still bothers me when I think back on it now. I had every chance to get in my car and drive away before things got bad. But when you're in a moment like that, your brain keeps trying to make it normal. You keep looking for the reasonable explanation because the unreasonable one is too hard to accept. So instead of leaving, I walked behind the counter. The floor changed from old tile to unfinished concrete as soon as I stepped through the back door. The hallway beyond it was narrow and dim, lit only by a single weak bulb mounted high on the wall near the ceiling. It cast a dirty yellow light that didn't reach very far. There were two doors on the right side of the hallway and one at the very end. One of the doors on the right was open just enough for me to see stacks of cardboard boxes inside. The other was closed. At the end of the hall, the final door stood wide open, revealing complete darkness beyond it. The scrape sound came again. This time I knew for sure it was coming from the room at the end of the hall. I stopped walking. My heartbeat had started to pick up, and I could feel it in my throat. "Hey," I said, louder this time. "You okay back there?" Nothing. Then, after about 2 seconds of silence, I heard something that made my skin crawl. A voice. Very low. Too low to make out the words. It wasn't loud enough to sound like someone calling for help. It sounded more like whispering or mumbling, like someone talking under their breath in the dark. I took another step forward without really meaning to. The smell hit me almost immediately. It was faint at first, but once I noticed it, I couldn't ignore it. A sour, damp smell, like wet wood and mildew. Underneath that was something metallic. Not strong enough to identify right away, but enough to make my stomach tighten. I moved closer to the end of the hallway and tried to peer into the darkness beyond the open door. I couldn't see much, just the vague shape of what looked like a storage room. Shelving units, cleaning supplies, maybe a freezer against one wall. Then I heard the whispering again, and this time I realized it wasn't coming from the room. It was coming from somewhere lower. I felt this immediate pulse of fear run through me. I looked down, seeing there was another door in the floor at the entrance of the room. A cellar door. It was the kind built flush into the concrete with a metal ring handle set into it. One side of it was slightly lifted, leaving a black gap no more than 2 inches wide. The whispering was coming from underneath it. I stared at that narrow opening and felt every muscle in my body go tight. For a second, I couldn't move. I couldn't even think clearly.
I can't go much further.
Because
Stay
my brain
with
was
me.
trying
We're
to
almost
process
clear.
something that didn't make sense. There was someone under the floor. The whispering stopped. I took a step back so fast that my shoe scraped against the concrete. The sound echoed down the hallway. And then, from
We have
beneath
to
the
hurry.
cellar
He could
door,
be back.
a voice said,
I know, I'm
very clearly
trying.
this time, "Don't let him
Almost
know
there.
you
Don't
heard
stop.
me." I think my whole body went numb in that moment. I stumbled backward again, almost losing my footing. The voice had sounded human, weak, yet terrified, like someone trying to speak without moving their mouth too much. I stared at the gap under the cellar door, waiting for them to say something else. Nothing. Then I heard a loud bang from somewhere outside the hallway, somewhere closer to the front of the store. I turned my head instantly toward the sound. It came from inside the main store, like something had hit one of the shelves. I didn't breathe, didn't move. Every instinct in my body told me the same thing at once, or someone else was in the building, and they hadn't been in the cellar. My eyes shifted back toward the dark storage room, then down to the cellar door again. I wanted to run. I also wanted to help whoever was under there, and those two instincts hit me at the exact same time. Before I could decide what to do, the voice beneath the floor whispered again. "He's back." I don't think I've ever felt fear like that before or since. Not the loud, panicked kind. The cold kind. The kind that seems to drain all the heat out of your body in 1 second. I backed away from the cellar door as quietly as I could, keeping my eyes fixed on the hallway behind me. I was trying to listen for movement from the front of the store, but my own heartbeat was so loud at that point that it was hard to hear anything else. Then came the sound of slow footsteps. Not running, not rushed, just calm footsteps moving across the tile floor in the store. One step at a time. I immediately stepped into the open storage room on the right side of the hallway and pressed myself against the wall beside the door frame. The room was cramped and smelled like bleach and damp cardboard. There were shelves stacked with paper towels, bottled drinks, motor oil, and boxes of cheap snacks. I had just enough room to hide if someone looked down the hallway too quickly. The footsteps stopped. Then I heard the faint creak of the back door behind the counter, opening wider. I held my breath so hard it started hurting. For a few seconds there was no sound at all. Then a man's voice, calm and almost casual, said, "Store's closed." The voice came from the hallway. Close, way too close. I squeezed my eyes shut for half a second, then opened them again, staring at the edge of the doorway inches from my face. I didn't answer. The man spoke again, a little louder this time. I said the store's closed. His voice didn't sound annoyed. Not that was what terrified me the most. If I had to describe it now, I'd say it sounded patient. Like he wasn't angry that someone was back there, just interested. I stayed perfectly still. The silence stretched for several long seconds. Then I heard him take another step, and another. He was walking down the hallway toward the back room, toward the cellar door. I leaned forward just enough to see a sliver of the hall through the gap beside the frame. All I caught was part of him, or a man wearing dark work pants and heavy boots. That was it. He passed slowly by the room I was hiding in, and I had to clamp my jaw shut to stop my teeth from chattering. He was bigger than I expected. Not huge, but broad through the shoulders. He stopped near the end of the hallway. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then I heard the metal ring on the cellar door rattle softly. He was checking it. A few seconds later, he spoke again. Except this time, he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to whoever was under the floor. "You still awake down there?" No response. He gave a soft chuckle. It was such a small sound, but it turned my blood cold. Because there was nothing emotional in it. No anger, no excitement, just this dry little laugh, like he already knew the answer. He moved around in the storage room at the end of the hall for maybe 10 seconds. I heard glass clink together, then a drawer or cabinet opening. I couldn't see what he was doing, Or then I heard another sound from the front of the store. An engine. My engine. At first, my brain couldn't process it. Then it clicked. My car was still outside. Still running? No, I had shut it off. Which meant someone had opened the door. Maybe more than one person was there. Maybe he wasn't alone. The engine noise stopped after a second, like someone had only turned the key halfway or tested something. Then silence. The man at the end of the hall said, almost to himself, "That's not good." I saw his boots turn. He started walking back toward the front. My body locked up again, because if he turned his head even slightly toward the storage room, he would see me. His footsteps got closer. Slow, steady, unhurried. I pressed myself so hard against the shelf behind me that a box shifted somewhere near my elbow. It made the tiniest cardboard scrape. The footsteps stopped instantly. I didn't breathe, didn't blink. For one horrible second, I thought it was over. I thought he'd heard me, and the next thing I'd see would be his face appearing around the doorway. Instead, after a pause that felt endless, he kept walking. Past the room, back toward the main store. The second I could no longer hear his boots on the concrete, I exhaled as quietly as possible and nearly collapsed from the release of tension. But I still didn't move. Because I knew two things now. There was someone trapped under that cellar door, and the man out front had no idea I was still in the building. Then I heard the bell over the front entrance jingle. Someone had just come in. The footsteps were fast, way faster than they had been before. The calm, patient walk I had heard earlier was gone. Now it sounded like the man was running through the store, straight toward the hallway. I didn't even think about it. "Come on," I whispered down into the cellar. The person below didn't move right away. For a split second, I thought they were too weak to climb out. Then a pale hand appeared from the darkness, gripping the edge of the opening. The arm was thin and trembling. I dropped to my knees and grabbed their wrist, pulling with everything I had. Behind me, the hallway light flickered again. The footsteps hit the concrete floor. He had reached the back door. "Hurry," I whispered. The person underneath finally pushed upward. A young woman climbed out of the cellar, her movements shaky and slow, like her muscles had forgotten how to work. Her clothes were dirty and damp, and her hair hung in tangled strands across her face. The moment she
Dispatch,
cleared
this is
the
Unit
opening,
12. We're
I
secure
yanked
at
her
the
to her feet.
roadside. Request immediate backup.
"Can you run?" I
Be
asked
advised,
quietly.
subjects are in shock.
She
We need
nodded,
an ambulance.
but she looked exhausted. The footsteps behind us stopped. For one terrible moment, the entire hallway fell silent. Then the man spoke. His voice was completely calm again. "You shouldn't have done that." The words seemed to echo off the concrete walls. I turned slowly. He was standing at the end of the hallway. Up close, he looked older than I expected.
Over here, we need help!
Maybe late 40s. His
What's the
face was
problem
thin
here?
and pale, with short
She's
gray
hurt.
hair and
We
a
were
thick
attacked.
beard that looked
All right,
like it
stay
hadn't
calm.
been trimmed in weeks.
Help is here.
His expression
Officer,
wasn't angry.
over here,
That
we
was
need
the
help!
worst part. He looked
What's the
almost
problem here?
disappointed, like
She's
someone
hurt.
watching
We were
a kid
attacked.
break a rule.
All right, stay calm.
His
help is
eyes
here.
moved from me to the
Officer,
woman beside
please,
me,
we need help.
then
Hold it
down
there.
to the broken
What
chain on
happened
the
to you?
floor.
Something chased
He
us
sighed.
from the woods.
"You were doing fine
All right,
down
stay
there,"
calm.
he said to her
You're safe
quietly.
now.
"Just a little longer." The woman beside me grabbed my arm. "Run," she whispered. The man took one slow step forward. I didn't wait for another. We both turned and sprinted down the hallway toward the store. The fluorescent lights above us buzzed loudly as we ran. My shoes slammed against the concrete floor, echoing through
Look,
the narrow
lights ahead.
corridor.
Please, please,
Behind us,
let's
the
go.
man started moving too.
Careful, stay close.
Not running, but fast enough.
I see them flashing.
By the time we burst through
Almost
the door
there.
behind the counter, he was already halfway down the hallway. The woman stumbled slightly as we ran across the tile floor toward the front entrance. "Wait!" the man called. His voice echoed through the store. "Your friend out there is still waiting?" The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. The woman. The one with the blue Honda. She was still outside. I reached the door and threw it open. The cold night air hit my face immediately. The woman was standing near the pumps exactly where I had imagined. Her car hood was open.
This way,
Us,
quick!
and she was leaning over
was
the
that?
engine with her phone flashlight.
Stay still.
She looked up when she saw us burst out of the store. Her face instantly changed. "What's going? Get in your car!" I yelled. She stared at us in confusion. Then she saw the woman beside me, dirty, barefoot, covered in grime. And then she saw the man walking out of the store behind us. Everything clicked at once. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God! Drive!" I shouted. Yeah, the woman slammed her hood shut and ran to the driver's door. I turned back just in time to see the man step out onto the cracked pavement under the flickering gas station lights. He wasn't chasing us. He was just watching. That same calm expression on his face. The rescued woman grabbed my sleeve. "My phone," she said weakly. I looked at her. I dropped it down there. We didn't have time for that. "Come on." The blue Honda's engine turned over with a rough grinding sound, and then it started. The driver leaned across the passenger seat and threw the door open. "Get in!" I helped the woman climb into the back seat first. She collapsed across the seat like she had no strength left. I jumped into the passenger seat and slammed the door. The driver didn't hesitate. She threw the car into reverse and spun the wheel, the tires screeching across the gravel as the car turned toward the road. As we sped past the gas pumps, I glanced back through the rear window. The man was still standing in the same spot, perfectly still, watching us leave. The flickering lights above him made his shadow stretch across the pavement behind him. For a moment, I thought that was the end of it. But as we pulled onto the highway, the woman driving asked the question that made the knot in my stomach tighten again. Who the hell was that guy? None of us answered, because none of us knew. The woman in the back seat was breathing hard, like every breath hurt. After a few seconds, she managed to say something. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "He's not alone." The driver slowed slightly. "What do you mean?" The woman in the back seat stared out the rear window. Her face had gone pale. "There were two of them." A cold wave ran through my chest. "What?" She swallowed. "The other one?" Her voice trembled. "He's still in the woods." For a few seconds, nobody said anything. The highway stretched out ahead of us, empty and dark, the headlights cutting a narrow tunnel through the forest. The rain that had been threatening earlier had finally started, tapping softly against the windshield. I turned halfway in my seat to look at the woman in the back. She was curled up against the door, shivering uncontrollably. Her arms were wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her body together. "Yikya, what do you mean, two of them?" I asked. Her eyes slowly moved from the window to me. "There were two," she repeated quietly. The driver glanced nervously at the rearview mirror. "You're saying there's another guy back there?" The woman shook her head weakly. "No, not back there." She looked back through the rear window again. "In the woods." The words sat in the car like a weight. The driver pressed the gas pedal
Hurry,
a
we
little
have to
harder.
keep moving.
I
"How
can't
do you
go
know
much
that?"
further.
I asked.
Stay with me.
For a moment,
We're
she
almost
didn't
clear.
answer. Then she swallowed and said something that made my skin crawl. Because he was the one who brought me there. The rain started coming down harder now, streaking across the windshield as the wipers squeaked back and forth. "Start from the beginning," I said. She took a slow breath. "My car broke down earlier tonight, maybe 15 miles before that gas station." Her voice sounded distant, like she was replaying the memory in her head. I tried calling roadside assistance, but I didn't have signal. I sat there for almost 40 minutes before a truck pulled over. The driver glanced at me again. "What kind of truck?" she asked. "A white pickup," the woman said. She rubbed her arms again, like she was trying to warm herself. The guy inside seemed normal at first. He said he knew a mechanic nearby and offered to drive me there. I already knew where this was going. "He didn't take you to a mechanic," I said. She shook her head slowly. "No." The windshield wipers squeaked again as the rain kept getting heavier. "He drove me down a dirt road that led through the woods. I kept asking where we were going, and he kept telling me it was just a shortcut." Her
Hurry,
voice
we have to
trembled
keep
slightly.
moving.
I
But
can't go
after a
much
while,
further.
I realized we were going
Stay
deeper
with
into
me.
the
We're
forest,
almost clear.
not toward any town. The driver tightened her grip on the wheel.
Hurry, we have to keep moving.
"So you
I
tried to
can't
get
go
out?"
much further.
"Yes."
Stay with me. We're almost clear.
"What happened?" The woman hesitated. Then he grabbed my arm. She looked down at her wrist. Even in the dim light of the car, I could see dark bruises forming around it. He told me to relax and said his friend would help fix my car. My
We
stomach
have
twisted.
to hurry. He could be back.
"His friend,"
I know,
I said
I'm
quietly.
trying.
She nodded.
Almost there. Don't stop.
The gas station. The rain was pounding on the roof now. So the guy from the station was expecting you, the driver said. Yes? The woman's breathing started getting shaky again. Yeah, they dragged me into the building through the back. There was already another girl down there in the cellar. My head snapped toward her. Another girl? She nodded slowly. She was already weak, like she'd been there longer than me. What happened to her? The driver asked. The woman's eyes filled with tears. He took her out the next night. None of us spoke. The only sound in the car was the rain and the tires humming against the wet road. After a few seconds, I asked the question I didn't want to ask. And she never came back? The woman shook her head. No. The driver let out a quiet breath. Oh my God. For a moment, we all sat in silence again. Then the woman in the back spoke. The second man, the one with the truck, he didn't stay at the gas station. What do you mean? I asked. He would leave sometimes. Where would he go? The woods. The word hung in the air. Every few hours, she continued quietly, he would come back and check on the cellar, then leave again. The driver glanced nervously at the dark forest rushing past outside the windows. Why the woods? The woman looked straight at me. I think he watches the road. A cold feeling spread through my chest. Watches it for what? For people. The driver suddenly slowed the car slightly. Hold on, she said. I looked at her. What? She pointed ahead through the windshield. There's something on the road. I leaned forward in my seat. At first, I couldn't see anything except rain and darkness. Then the headlights illuminated something farther up the highway. A vehicle, parked sideways across the road, blocking both lanes. The driver's voice shook. Is that a truck?